Hey guys, thanks for checking out the My Career Path podcast. This week's episode is going to be a little bit different. This was actually an interview I did with John Dinkelman a while back in December, and I never was able to quite get the audio to work out as well as I wanted. I didn't actually record the video. It was just a phone call conversation I had with him where I did an interview similar to some of the other interviews I had. So this is just going to be audio only, so feel free to just put it on in the background, listen to it while you're doing your work or whatever you are doing during your day, and just enjoy. This was an awesome conversation I had with him about opportunities in the foreign service world, and I just think it was an amazing opportunity, and I'm sorry it took so long. I apologize to John. I told him this was originally going to come out in January, but I had to kind of mess with the audio, play with it, and then I got sick. There's a number of excuses, but all in all, I apologize. So hopefully you guys enjoy this episode. Make sure to stick around to the end to find out where the test is in your area, if it's something you're interested in, some of the study helps, some of the other people that you can reach out to hopefully help you out if this is a career path that you might want to explore and look into. So thanks for tuning in, and I hope you guys enjoy. All right, John. Well, I'm happy to have you on the My Career Path podcast. Thanks so much for taking time out of your busy day to come and chat with us. Why don't you just give a brief overview of what you do and kind of what your role is at over in DC?
Well, I'm more than happy to. Thank you very much for having me on today. I can't tell you how grateful I am for the opportunity to blow the horn a little bit about the State Department and specifically the Foreign Service. So, Colton, kudos to you for helping me get on today.
Of course,
Um,
happy to do it.
so I am a Foreign Service officer. I work for the United States Department of State, and I have been doing my job for 36 long years.
Woo!
Um,
Awesome.
yeah, it just shows you how old I actually am. And giving you the bottom line up front, I can't imagine having had a better career or a more fulfilling opportunity to professionally express myself over the past few decades. And so, as with many individuals, when I was in my 20s, I really didn't know where my life was going to take me, and I had some ideas about what I liked, and I definitely knew what I didn't like, and I didn't really have many ways to express them. But fortunately, as I'm sure will come out in our discussion over the coming minutes, I was lucky in that I had the opportunity to join the American Foreign Service, and I have never looked back.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. How did you first start looking at foreign service for your kind of career path? I mean, having been there for such a long time, there's got to be something that kind of stuck out with you that, like, you know what, let's try for that. Did you have someone that led you to that career that pointed it out? Because I had never heard of it until I was probably in my late teens, 18, 19, when I met Patrick Horn, one of our mutual friends.
Yeah, boy, I, as with so many people in this profession, I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to trip over it one day, and and had I not had that almost accidental chance to know about this, I don't know if I'd have ever had the opportunity in the normal course of a life of a kid growing up in the Intermountain West to have ever come across the profession. That's one of the reasons why it's so important for me now in my present job to get the word out to as many people as possible.
Right.
In my case, I am the child of a military officer. My father was in the American Army, and I, of course, am, as I said earlier, I've been around a while. I'm a product of a different generation,
Hmm.
and as a tail end baby boomer, I grew up in the 1960s and 70s. And one day, my father, fortunately for all of us, my father came home from an assignment in Vietnam, and he told us when he landed, he said, "It's great to be home. We're moving." And as with all military families, we packed up the house in Salt Lake City, And for the first time in my very young life, at 12 years old, I got on an airplane and left the Rocky Mountains. We moved to a city in Turkey where my father was assigned to a NATO installation in a city called Izmir.
Okay.
Um, that was probably the single most disheveling experience of my life. Um, I I had moved from a suburban American environment with a double car garage and lawnmowers to an urban environment where we lived in an apartment building uh, with people who had a different culture. They spoke a different language. They had a different religion, and every aspect of my life had been uprooted. But what I discovered after the first few very disruptive months is I found that life really wasn't much different in the Middle East than it was in the middle of Utah. There were there were still the same social contracts, the same relationships. Instead of the little old lady on the corner telling my mom when she caught me at 7-Eleven stealing a candy bar, there was another little old lady downstairs who told my mom when I was stealing an orange from the store, right? The social contract doesn't change. It just has different people doing it differently in different places around the world. And I found myself, I don't want to say enjoying, because I'm not sure if I was smart enough to realize the experience I was having,
Right.
but I found that it wasn't as bad an experience as I had feared, or as one would have thought.
Hmm.
And simultaneous to this waking up to the existence of other cultures and other ways of life, as an early teen, my father and my mother became very good friends with an American couple who were not in the military. They were a lovely couple, almost like uncle and aunt to me. They were from Iowa, and it just so happened that he was the American consul at a very small consulate in the city where we lived. And for some reason, which is known only to them now, and they've long passed, they allowed me as a 13, 14-year-old boy to dress up one day, take off of school, put on a tie, and sit in this man's office and watch him do his job. I think in the fullness of time, I think my parents probably recognized that there was something in all of this which might work for me as an adult, and I will be grateful for them forever for it. Um, so as I got there early, scared to death, feeling like I had dressed up for church on a weekday, my this lovely man just had me sit in the corner of his office. And the first thing that happened at 9 o'clock was that an American airman and his wife came into his office with a brand new baby. And after the mandatory cooing over the baby and talking about
Of
feeding
course.
schedules
Yep.
and diaper changes and everything else, I watched this man pull out a piece of paper. He examined the passports of the mother and the father, and he created a birth certificate for the baby. And right in front of my eyes, he had created an American citizen. And I was really just overwhelmed that this was an actual thing that people did for a living. That couple left, and then a series of Turks came into his office one by one. This was long before the era of bulletproof glass or concerns about COVID or anything else.
Right.
And they would shake his hand, sit at his desk, hand him their passport, and he would talk to them in Turkish for a few minutes. And after a while, he would take their passport and he would stamp it and he would fill something out on it and send them on their way. And only slowly did I realize that he was giving them permission to go to America. He was issuing visas.
Ah.
And and I was really overwhelmed. And then after an hour or so, he told me I had to go home because I could not be with him for the rest of his workday because he was going to prison. He was going, he was taking the mail and the vitamin supplements, and he was going to visit the considerable number of drug dealers who were Americans who had been convicted. And part of his job as a consul was to see to their welfare and their situation and report back to their families in the United States.
Hmm.
And I left that office changed, uh, albeit very young. I was just overwhelmed that such a profession was even possible. And ever since then, I found it to be just an attraction that has never ended in my life. Unfortunately, like many individuals, the realities of adolescence and college set in, and I kind of lost the vision of of wanting to be an American diplomat when the realization came that that was probably something that someone smarter, better looking from a prestigious university would be better suited for. And so I abandoned that dream as I came to realize that just a dumb frumpy kid from Utah probably didn't meet the expectations. Um, and so I went on to Brigham Young University, where I majored in business because I needed some way to make money and have a job, and there was no way at that point that I could bridge the gap between my interests and my dreams and the practical reality that I anticipated would bite me at some point in the future
Hmm.
of needing to have a profession where I could make money to support a wife and children if I was ever lucky enough to have either.
Yeah.
And so what I found during my college years was I would sneak across campus. I would leave the business building and all of its accounting and statistics and other courses that really did not interest me, but I felt I needed to have because that was what one did to be responsible.
Hmm.
And I would sneak over to the political science building and I would listen to lectures and audit classes because I really enjoyed that profession and I really enjoyed the subject matter that that came up on those classes weren't work. They
Hmm.
weren't drudgery. They were enjoyable. And I found myself just loving them. But there was no way I could ever hope to apply it as a profession.
Yeah.
And then one day, one of the professors, a very good man, uh, he said to everybody in the room that the Foreign Service exam was being proctored in a few months, and he wholeheartedly encouraged everybody in the room to take it because, as he said, there is no downside risk to the Foreign Service exam process,
Hmm.
and everybody should take it at least once. And I remembered the experience from my earlier teenage years, and I felt this warmth in my soul that that was something I needed to do. It
Hmm.
just felt so right. So I registered for the test with the confidence of a typical kid from Utah, um, that that I was doing the right thing, only to find that a few weeks later, when the results came, that the Department of State told me that I sucked at at the examination process.
I took
Um,
the Foreign Service test once as well a couple of years
so
back.
then you
Yes.
know that feeling,
I know that
right?
same feeling. There's the three sections on it, and the one that I was apparently just not good at was what is it? I think it was determining what the best course of action was given a scenario. I don't know. That's probably not the official term, but if I could
Well,
argue it, I probably would have been okay. But just trying to answer it, I was like, this is tough. I'm not sure what they think the best answer is, but yes, that talk a little bit about the Foreign Service exam, kind of what it does,
and kind of give a breakdown of it. As a recruiter, I'm sure you hear it all the time.
Oh, I'm more than happy to.
Okay.
Suffice to say, I failed the Foreign Service exam many, many times over the ensuing years and was only able to get into the Foreign Service after about a decade of
Wow.
trying. Um,
Wow.
and that was oh so many years ago now. But the examination itself, um, after now in the fullness of time, as I understand why the Department of State has this Foreign Service examination process
Mhm.
and why it can be so, uh, how do I say this, discouraging
Yeah.
to come to the realization that even though you like a subject, you may not measure up. Um, there's a reason behind all of this, in that if an individual is dissuaded by a bureaucratic process that their own government is ambivalently putting before them, then we probably do not want to have them in a profession where that same government will be proactively placing them in adversarial, acrimonious situations with foreign interlocutors who want them to fail.
Mm.
And so tenacity is one of the factors of the examination process that it goes unspoken, but it is a blatant reality that is one of the things that people are being tested for, albeit passively. So
That's
so
that's a very good point.
for you who did not pass the examination, I would tell you, and for anybody else who takes it one time, um, that they should try it again and again and again. The average number of times it takes an individual to successfully get through the Foreign Service examination process is 3.
Hmm.
And as someone who personally contributed to bringing
To
that
that
average
average.
up, um, I I can wholeheartedly endorse that it is well worth it,
Hmm.
and that they should not give up, because that's the biggest key in the process.
No, I would totally agree, and that's something that I've been looking at doing again, studying better and being better prepared for because I've had that similar itch in talking with Patrick Horn, some of the other families that I knew when I was over in Kazakhstan. It was just an amazing experience to see how they represent America and American interests and kind of bridging that gap through other countries and cultures. And it was some of the most amazing things that I've seen. I was over in Kazakhstan when the World Fair was kind of going on in 2017, I think,
Hmm.
and it was just amazing to see them work with uh, the embassy over there and the people and helping out. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. So some of the coolest work that I have seen has been from that, which initially led me to choosing international business as my degree. And I had a similar
Ah,
experience.
that was my degree,
Really? No, it's
international
awesome.
business. Yes.
Because I was like, I think that's just so cool. And I agree. I think the international law and political science classes, I was like, yeah, you know what? Those are really cool, seeing how that kind of connects between the different countries. And I think that's just an amazing story. I think that's awesome. Well, let's kind of jump into after you passed the Foreign Service exam. Uh, what was the kind of path right after that? Did you have to go out to DC? Where did that take you afterwards?
Well, after I finally passed the Foreign Service exam, I loaded up the car and I drove up Parley's Canyon and came back to Washington D.C. And I it was a very interesting experience for me, or at least a very memorable experience for me,
Hmm.
in that when I walked into the big room in the State Department where all of the new Foreign Service officers were reporting for the first time, I felt like I was in the Disney movie Cars, right? And that everybody else was a Maserati or a Lamborghini, and I was Mater, the tow truck. Um, these people were all from these East Coast universities. They were international relations majors. They had political science, advanced political science degrees. And here I was, this frumpy kid from Utah with a bachelor's in business. Um, but I was happy to be there. I would have wiped the floors to have been in the organization. And and while there were many, many kind and good people, there were also many people who seemed to pray to the god of the zero-sum game. And in that world at that time, I was certainly the zero. And I really did feel like a fish out of water. But nevertheless, I was in, and I was happy to be in. And after the initial training, orientation, which is about 6 weeks long or so,
Hmm.
it's during that period that they assign you to your first overseas assignment. And they have a large ceremony towards the end where they have a bunch of little miniature flags sitting on the table. And all 47 of us in that class had a flag up there at the table, and it was just a matter of figuring out whose was what. And when they lifted the flag of Yugoslavia up, they called my name and they told me I was going to Belgrade.
Wow.
And so I spent the next year in Washington preparing for that assignment in Belgrade by learning Serbo-Croatian and all of the necessary tradecraft related to the job that I was going to be performing.
Huh.
And then after all of that was completed in August of 1989, I landed in Belgrade, Yugoslavia when it was still Yugoslavia. And I spent 2 years there. And if you're a student of history, you'll know that the words Yugoslavia and 1989, you know, caused some trepidation because it was my opportunity or my misfortune to watch a nation disintegrate before my eyes as I spent my first overseas assignment in what was to become a terrible civil war zone.
Yeah.
Fortunately, for me at least, I finished that assignment in 1991 and left for my second assignment, which was to London in the United Kingdom. I was a staff assistant at that big embassy in London. But the realities, of course, are that with a major civil war and the closure of embassies and the opening of new republics and the need for establishing new embassies, I was young, I had the language and the experience, and so much of the time that I would have been assigned to London, I was actually back on the Balkan Peninsula helping to open up new embassies in the former Yugoslavia.
Wow.
I was in London long enough to procure the most expensive souvenir of my life. I married a British woman, and together with my British wife, as soon as we got married, we went to our first assignment together, which was my third assignment in the Foreign Service, and that was to the Republic of the Marshall Islands,
Hmm.
an island called Majuro, where we lived on a little atoll that was about 1 mile long by 250 meters wide, with about 30,000 of our closest friends. Uh, we were young and newlyweds and didn't know that we were supposed to be unhappy or isolated or lonely. And so we had two very interesting years, our first 2 years together on that small little island, before going on to our next assignment, which would be 4 years in the Netherlands, where I was a general services officer in The Hague. It was during our 4 years in the Netherlands that we were blessed with our first two children, a girl and a boy. Um, and then after that, we came back to Washington for a year of Turkish language training before heading off to being the supervisory human resources officer in Ankara.
So
And
getting
after
back to
two,
Turkey.
yep, back to Turkey. After 2 years in Turkey, I came back to Washington for 5 years, where I was the trainer. I was the actual person who taught the class, where I felt so isolated and out of place 15 years earlier.
It's come full
Um,
circle.
indeed, it really did. And then after 5 years in Washington, I went to the Mexican border, where I was the consul, the principal officer at a small little consulate about 60 miles south of Tucson, Arizona, in a place called Nogales, Mexico. And we spent 4 years on the border before proceeding to our next assignment, which was the deputy chief of mission at the American Embassy in the Bahamas. We lived in Nassau for 3 years. And since ending that job about 10 years ago, I have been exclusively back here in Washington in various leadership and management positions. I most recently was the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Logistics Management, and I finished that job about a year and a half ago and took the job I'm in now, which is a diplomat in residence. I am attached to Howard University.
Okay.
I am one of 17 Foreign Service employees who are assigned to universities around the United States, and each one of us has a recruiting portfolio for a certain region, and I am in charge of Delaware, Maryland, and the District of Columbia, and I
Wow.
base myself out of Howard University.
That's amazing. That's just such a cool, I mean, career path. I mean, just being able to travel between different places, and that was something that I love about travel is you get to see the places and kind of, be there, but living in a place for an extended period of time, years, or if you only see it for a few weeks, you don't really get to fully experience kind of what that culture brings. And that's something that's also been kind of appealing to me about foreign service is you get to really experience a place. You get to experience the culture, the language, the odds and ends, not just the main tourist attractions. And that's something I've always thought was really unique about kind of foreign service work.
That's exactly right. You can't really experience a place until, as I like to say, you've had to go to the hospital there, or you've got a barber there, or you know where the good groceries are
Right.
at the decent store down the alley, right?
That's right.
Um,
So
and you
you've
go to
haggled for
church.
fruit.
Exactly, exactly. And you go to church with people when you pray by their side, when you mourn with them,
Hmm.
when you take care of their kids in Sunday school, right?
Hmm.
It's a different world, and it truly does make you a more rounded, I believe. It certainly has made me a much more well-rounded individual.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your current work, kind of as a recruiter and working at the
Sure.
university, like you talked about. What does that kind of look like on a day-to-day basis?
It is the strangest job I've ever had in the Foreign Service because it is so different from anything else that I've done,
Hmm.
obviously, right?
Right.
Um, I'm essentially a recruiter, and I do a lot of visiting to universities during career fairs. I do a lot of sitting at booths with a lot of papers and sometimes just barking at kids to stop by and talk to me. But more often than not, individuals, especially those who would be inclined to such a job, are drawn to me
Hmm.
and want more information. But every once in a while, there's a young college student out there who, like you, has never even heard of the profession. And only after they get to know it and understand it a little bit more do you see their eyes light up and
Right.
they go, "Oh my gosh, this is similar to me as an early teen." They realize that this is an actual thing
Hmm.
and it's something that might be possible for them. And is truly for me the most gratifying opportunity.
That's amazing. Do you still keep in touch with anyone that you've recruited or whatnot? Do they kind of keep in
Oh,
touch? And
certainly,
oh, that's awesome.
certainly. Some of them far too much. They will call me every time they're moving down a step, either passing this step in the exam or passing the assessment or getting their security clearance or getting their medical clearance or getting on the suitability list or where they're at on the register or finally an offer. And then,
Wow.
of course, they want me to come on the very first day when they swear in.
Yeah,
It's almost like a parental relationship. It's really kind of enjoyable.
that's awesome. Um, what would you say are kind of the main traits that you kind of look for or know? I know we talked about resilience and kind of getting back up and making sure that you kind of power through. What other things do you kind of look for in new recruits in helping people see that foreign service is a good option?
By far, the single most important element or characteristic that is needed in this profession, regardless of the job, regardless of the focus of one's career track,
Hmm.
is the need for emotional intelligence, the ability to read the room, to know how to measure one's actions, one's comments, one's interactions with people to maximize the possibility of success, whatever might be defined, however success might be defined.
Hmm.
Um, you would think that it would be more common that people would be able to refrain from saying something that might offend or might be misinterpreted, but it's actually a relatively uh, rare trait that someone can consistently know how to alter their delivery to meet the need of the audience. It
Right.
requires a lot of skill in assessing others and in being able to refine yourself so that you can apply yourself in different ways as effectively.
Right.
And surprisingly, I mean, simply put, to learn how to be a diplomat.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure in the end if that's a trait that one can truly learn or if one doesn't just simply possess already.
Hmm.
My jury is still out on that one. For I haven't seen anyone who doesn't naturally possess it who has been successful.
Right.
But I'm sure there might be exceptions to my rule.
Right. Are there any degrees, like college degrees or anything like that, that you would recommend that would maybe
No,
make someone no?
absolutely not. Absolutely not. The woman who sits next to me in our virtual office setting um, is an opera major from
Really?
Nebraska, right?
That's awesome.
And well, it's exactly what it needs to be because there is no one career path. There is no one discipline or track that one can follow that that says, "Oh yeah, this person has it to be a diplomat."
Hmm.
Our examination, I mean, we love political science majors. We love international relations majors. Those are great people, and
Hmm.
I'm sure they're all wonderful. Um, but there is no one single group that has a monopoly on the dimensions for which the Foreign Service exam measures people.
Hmm. Well, that's great. That's good to hear. I mean, I think it's an amazing career path for just about anybody looking at other cultures who's been fascinated with traveling the world, helping other countries, meeting new people. I think it's a phenomenal place, and I never heard about it being an option ever growing up in high
Right.
school or college. It was just never something that I knew about until I met with people like you and like Patrick Horn that just kind of altered how I see different things and kind of led me on this route down this podcast. And so I just think that's amazing, and I hope more people kind of look into this as a potential opportunity for them because I don't think, like you said, it's not exclusive to any one group of people. Just anyone who's determined, has that tenacity, I think has the capability to kind of go after that.
I agree. There's a national value. There are some core precepts of our country
Hmm.
that are at play here, and it's really important that the word get out, as you say, um, because there are many nations around the world where the diplomatic corps would be from one certain element of that society, whether it's ethnic or religious or gender, whatever the case, or geographic,
Hmm.
right? Um, these things are so counterintuitive to America, where we believe, we are a very diverse liberal Western democracy of 330 plus million people, and it just makes sense that the face of the diplomatic element of our national power should mirror the population of the country.
Hmm.
And so, in the same way that a Cajun from Louisiana, or a Brahmin from Boston, or a Navajo can possess the skills and the traits that we're looking for, we need to make sure that those populations and all other populations are aware that this is a career track.
Hmm.
And then from there, those people should be going through our selection process to make themselves available for us. Hence the Foreign Service exam.
Hence the Foreign Service Exam. Well, thank you so much, John, for taking the time to chat with me and share your story. I have really appreciated it. I think it's helped me, and I'm probably going to be start dusting off my studying books again for that Foreign Service Exam because I love it so much. Um, so I really appreciate it again for taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know it's been kind of hectic with us going back and forth on email, but thank you so much.
You are more than welcome. There's one thing I would ask you to add, if at all
Sure.
possible. I want to make sure that listeners to your podcast understand that the Foreign Service exam is offered 3 times a year.
Hmm.
Once in February, once in June, and once in October. And registration for each offering opens up approximately 8 weeks prior to the actual sitting for the test. Individuals who are interested in being notified when the exam registration window opens should go to careers.state.gov and register in our talent network for notifications of those and any other openings that may come for the Foreign Service. For the Foreign Service Generalist track is only one of many ways that individuals can enter the Foreign Service. And so if anyone has any questions, of course, they can direct them to careers.state.gov, where I or any one of the other 17 diplomats and residents around the country will be happy to answer questions.
Perfect. I'll make sure to put that in, and then as well in the description of the video that I'll put up, as well as in the podcast, I'll try to grab any links that you would like me to put in, but careers.state.gov, study help, anything like that. I'll kind of reach out to you and try to get that from you if I can. Would you
Sure.
be able to
It's
help
all
me out
on
with
that
that?
site, and I'm happy to provide it. The chat with a
Perfect.
diplomat or connect with a diplomat option is the very useful one, where
Okay.
I and my other counterparts just field questions all the time from people within and without our region.
Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. If you like this episode, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more interviews and episodes like it. I do this every week, and if it's something you find helpful or useful in your life, let me know down below. I really appreciate it. Until next time, I'll catch you guys later. See ya.